Welcome to the Lila Life Show. I'm your host, Linda Andrews, and I'm so happy to be bringing to you today Peggy Plassche. Welcome to the show, Peggy. I can't wait to dive in with you.
Thank you so much, Linda. It's great to be with you today, and Happy New Year to everyone who's listening.
Yes, Happy New Year. Peggy is the founder of the microdose diet. I want to set the stage a little bit contextually, and we're going to dive in. I am so looking forward to our conversation.
I am too.
All right. So Peggy has spent 20 years in the financial services and tech industries as an executive and a VC, a venture capitalist. And she speaks and writes about the benefits of alternative medicine, including microdosing psilocybin. So if you are curious, you may learn some things today that you hadn't learned before, known before, both in professional and personal growth. Founder of the microdose diet, a holistic protocol based on the combination of alternative medicine that aims at rewiring the brain. We could all use a little of that, calming the body, mastering the emotions, and raising the energy to reach more success. Her book, More, the Microdose Diet, the 90-day plan for more success, passion, and happiness, will be published in May, the day after my birthday, 2024. In parallel, Peggy is currently working with experts in the psilocybin space to bring to market high quality microdosing products, which it can be hard to find. So we can talk a little bit about that. As an experienced public speaker, she's been at more than 50 global events across the globe. And one of her latest speaking engagements, Microdosing for More Success, Passion, and Happiness, which will definitely frame today's conversation. And I love that this is happening today. You may still be in that New Year's momentum. Hopefully, you have that for maybe a few more months, actually. But if you just need a little extra inspiration for the year, I aim to bring that to you also through the conversation. So, again, Peggy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be with you today.
Everything that we do here, from the frame that I continue to focus on, is where business meets well-being. I want to be a world-class provider for people where business meets well-being, more specifically pre-revenue to $1 million in annual revenue entrepreneurs, which I think often get overlooked in the full ecosystem, which we can talk more about. But I share that as a frame. I think there's so much that comes up during those first stages of business for someone, and they're usually rubbing up against their own self-sabotage,
Yeah.
the success words. You may feel far from a success most of those most of those days. So that you have so much insight that you can share, but I'd love to hear first your origin story and how that eventually took you into psychedelics, and I'll have a million more questions.
Thank you so much, and I'll make it quick just to give some context, but I'm sure that's not what your audience is tuning in today. So, as you mentioned, I used to be in finance for the last 20 years. As I'm sure everyone can hear to my accent, I'm from France. So originally, I live in Canada, and you know what? I've always loved finance. We were discussing offline the intellectual challenge and all that great stuff. But to be honest, I picked finance because in my mind, when I was a kid, it was the definition of success.
Mm.
And probably, Oliver Stone movie, Wall Street, that's my generation. I was born in 77. So for me, that was what I aspired to be, someone in North America working in finance. And that's definitely not what my life was lining up to be, because I'm coming from a very small town in France. My parents were not educated, so let's say that I didn't really have a lot of things going for me. But I worked very hard and and finally I did make it. But I was riddled with anxiety, depression, self-sabotaging behavior. And I want to really talk about that because it's very important for your audience. Um, and I had a very successful career by any definition, but I was on autopilot. I was just basically going through the motions and really I would say I was living my life more through someone else's playbook, the society playbook,
Mm.
than my own playbook. So I was kind of playing someone else's part versus my part. And even the goal, as I mentioned, to be in finance was actually a goal that was fed to me. by the media, by all entertainment industry, but that was not really something that was calling me. So during the pandemic, at the time I had my business, I had an advisory business for investment funds who wanted to invest in venture capital deals. So that was really my area of expertise, technology, fintech especially. And during the pandemic, my business took a downturn because everything was frozen. People were not looking to invest. There was a lot of panic.
Mm-hmm.
We forget about that now,
Mm-hmm.
but there was a lot of panic in the the first 6 9 months, I would say. And it also became more and more apparent that I was struggling with very bad mental health challenges,
Mm-hmm.
and the two really collided. And I think it was really a blessing in disguise because that is how I came to psychedelics, because I've always been very reluctant to take prescription drugs.
Mm-hmm.
I was not interested in going to see a doctor who's going to give me a prescription for a medication that is going on vacation for free every year, sponsored by the pharma company, and that I would have to take for the next 30 years just to hide the symptoms. I always wanted to really go more at the root of the problem and understanding, okay, why? But I was so in bad shape that I was really thinking about it. And at the time, suddenly information on psychedelics came to me left, right, and center. And, obviously, finance person, I'm reading, Wall Street Journal, Economist, Financial Times, and they're all running things on psychedelics. And in the VC industry, as you know, in the tech industry in Silicon Valley, it is very well known. People do psychedelics, the microdose, whatever. But for me, it was not for mental health, it was for performance.
Mm-hmm.
And when I learned about really the great success of using psychedelic for mental health, I decided to give it a go. And I've seen such tremendous success that I've decided to go in that direction. So I closed my advisory business in finance, and that's how I launched the microdose diet. So that was really my journey towards where I am today.
Wow, what a journey. So for you at that nexus point, were you like, had you been for a while feeling like you wanted to be a founder? Did this come up because of the psychedelics and the microdose diet coming to you? Tell me a little bit about that, because sitting on the VC side, going to the founder side, essentially, that's a big decision.
Yeah, well, I was an entrepreneur on and off for the last 10, 15 years. And even as a VC, I was actually an advisor.
Mm-hmm.
So I had my own advisory business. So I
Mm-hmm.
started some businesses that didn't really work. Then I started that advisory business, which I had for many years. So I was familiar with entrepreneurship as an investor, but as an entrepreneur myself. And
Mm-hmm.
I've seen firsthand what I think you're trying to educate your audience with, all these challenges. And
Mm-hmm.
we always talk about very tangible challenges. Okay, raising money, minimum viable product, product market fit, all that great stuff. But I think the most important topic we don't talk about is, we talk about mindset. Mindset is not enough. Like if your nervous system is fried, mindset, who cares? If you cannot manage your emotions, who cares about your mindset? And that's the thing, is that we all know that the conscious mind is only a small portion of our mind. The unconscious is the most important. So we focus on the smallest part when we work on mindset. And we miss the unconscious mind, we miss the nervous system, the mind-body connection, we miss the emotions. And that's what catches you every time. And I had myself a lot of boom and bust cycles in my life. And that was self-sabotage every time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the most important thing that people need to understand when they want success. It can be success as an entrepreneur, can be success finding a romantic partner, losing weight, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. If you don't address first these blocks, you're just wasting your time. You're going to exhaust yourself, but the results will be very underwhelming.
It's interesting. The timeline for myself leaving college athletics to then what I would say shortly after was like the healing journey, but it came from such a fried nervous system, a lot of unprocessed trauma, and the nerve like if I look back to this beginning of the healing journey and how many years later it took me to understand the nervous system, I mean, I think it would probably be close to a decade later. And it was so hard to just figure that out. And now I can literally feel what the feeling of fried feels like. You know, I know that there's much in my environment that can make me feel fried, and I have to keep a dial on all that, and
Yeah,
like that tracking back to overall well-being. But it's like you completely miss those cues and you've accepted chaos as the operating system,
exactly.
and underneath that it's like just giving that nervous system some love, not to oversimplify it, but either you said the nervous system, I'm like there's some keys in that, there's some keys in that.
Yeah. And, understanding where you're coming from, for your unconscious mind,
Mm-hmm.
familiarity equals safe. But
Mm-hmm.
most of us, we grew up in environments that were not optimal. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying that to throw the stones or at caregivers. That's not my point. But you want to be realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And we all had parents, teachers, churches, that environment that fed us limiting beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Period.
Not because they were bad people, just because
Right.
they
Or
believed,
not necessarily because they were either.
they believed it themselves. So they
Mm-hmm.
were just saying their own truth. So if you had parents, for example, who thought that if you're rich, it's because you stole money from others.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised Catholic, where, being wealthy is frowned upon. Well, you're going to have problems with money.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the reality of it. As long as you have not cleaned up all this, pardon my French, crap,
Mm-hmm.
just gonna come and play out in your life. And that is just a small, easy example.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even talking big trauma. I'm not even talking neglect, abuse, whatever. And that's the challenge, is that we are in this hustle culture when we're telling people get up at 5, journal, meditate, work out, blah 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 blah, until I don't know 6:37 in the morning, then work for 12 hours and whatever. Why? Remove the foot from the brake. Life will be way easier instead of pushing on the accelerator and the brake at the same time. And that's exactly why I developed the microdose diet. It's this idea of, okay, we're going to combine microdosing psilocybin to help calm your nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
help lower your ego barrier. And then we're adding tapping, because I want you to start understanding what it is to feel safe
Mm-hmm.
normally and what it is to feel safe when you want to reach a certain goal.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us, we don't think that reaching the first, already a normal situation, we don't feel safe. We're like, you have
If you were the best case scenario without the neglect, without the abuse, like just baseline.
just baseline, you're already pretty bad. I would say someone who, on top of that, had a normal childhood, which
Mm-hmm.
means with a lot of trauma, because no one has the perfect childhood,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be even worse. So your baseline, if you say you want your nervous system to be from 0 to 10, your baseline is already a 10.
Mm-hmm.
You have no capacity for anything else. So you really need to calm down and be comfortable with being calm. For me, being calm was extremely stressful
Mm-hmm.
because it was so unfamiliar, because I grew
Mm-hmm.
up in chaos. And it's all these things that tapping, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with tapping, but that is really helpful to break these connections between your body and your mind and really remove this emotional charge. So it's great to remove limiting belief,
Mm-hmm.
but also to remove emotional trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say when you are a kid, You were supposed to do a presentation at school and you totally, it was a disaster.
Mhm.
Well, you're likely gonna have challenge with public speaking later. You might have social anxiety. All of that, you know, that needs to be removed. Or are you going to be successful as an entrepreneur if you cannot pitch your company to VC, for example? If you
Because of public speaking scared incident when you're in third grade.
Exactly. So all these things need to be reworked. So, you know, like the 90-day plan I was mentioning is really a combination for you to go back to what your optimal state will be. And when I say optimal, okay, it took us 30, 45 years, whatever your age, to be there. So it's not in 90 days, but you're going to go from 0 to 100. You're going to go from 0 to 10, then you redo it a year later, 10 to... So it is still, you know, like it's not magic, let's be honest.
Which I love. It's almost like it maybe an intended pun or an unintended pun, but the micro dosing component of like making those shifts over 90 days, that's going to stack over a year. You redo it the next year. In that mentally felt like microdosing in a way, because it's like the incremental shifts that then compound.
Exactly. And you know, like you need your system to adjust. So it takes time, it
Mm-hmm.
elevates, you stabilize, you elevate, it
Mm-hmm.
stabilize. So again, you know, I'd love to tell you, okay, 90 days, you're going to become a mix of the Dalai Lama, Oprah Winfrey, and Tom Cruise and Serena Williams, but it's not true. It's not true. But you're going to be a better version of yourself. And you're
Right.
be way more suited to be successful. So if you were mentioning prosperity, well-being, and consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to be prosperous, well, you need to be comfortable with the idea that prosperous is safe, prosperous is good,
Mm-hmm.
and you're worthy enough to be prosperous.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, okay, you can work very hard, but you're going to self-sabotage and then you're going to face what I faced. Boom, bust, boom, bust. Because you're going to work hard, you're going to make the money.
Mm-hmm.
Then your unconscious mind is going to say, well, first, it's not safe. Second, you're definitely not a $1 million a year person. You're more a 100K. And then money disappear. Bust. Then you work again. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
Bust. It's just your unconscious that's doing the work for you, protecting you.
I like how you put that though, the boom bust cycles, and that being for anybody listening right now, an ideal way for you to tune in. Where am I self-sabotaging? What are these patterns that continuously feel familiar that maybe you do feel ashamed of or guilty of, or it could even become a secret for you. But just being able to look at it, I think there is so much of the guilt, shame, so you can't even look at it, you can't even touch it.
Yeah.
For myself rubbing up against those issues, it was like, I can't even say I have this problem. But then it's like years later, you overcome the problem, you have the new problem you're dealing with. But everything felt very cyclical. And
Yeah.
I can see that play out in my own life. I can see that play out with clients. So for you, what was your first moment with the psychedelics, either you witnessing in others or for yourself, that you're like, wow, there's something powerful here that helps with break the self-sabotage?
Yeah. So I I used to do tapping, which
Mm-hmm.
was
Like
really
the emotional freedom technique, the
as an
EFT.
emotional freedom technique,
Okay.
exactly, where you tap on the meridian points, you know.
Yes, I've used it.
So, yeah. So, you know, hypnosis, EFT, visualization. I mean, I was doing the whole shebang, you know, like everything that could exist, I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Big challenge for me is that I needed something that tie everything together.
Mm-hmm.
And microdosing was that for me because
Mm-hmm.
microdosing alone, you know, like it's not a magic pill. It's not going
Mm-hmm.
to detect by itself where the problems are and fix that. That's not how it works, you know. But it's all extremely helpful. You know, I was mentioning calming your nervous system. It creates the space. It
Mm-hmm.
creates that buffer, and it elevates your mood as well. It creates that clarity. So if before you were maybe feeling hopeless or helpless, it will help you feel more empowered. And that's when you can start making decisions that are better for you. So it's not so much that the microdosing is doing the work, it's that it enables you
Mm.
have more success with the
Mm-hmm.
work you're doing. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say for people who are interested in microdosing psilocybin, I really recommend it personally, but they can find tons of resources everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We have a weekly newsletter, which is called the Microdose Diet. So that's not too difficult to find. It's on
Yep.
Substack. Also have a YouTube channel, same under my name. So they can find a lot of resources. If they decide to microdose, the most important thing is to make sure they do it with quality product.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was wondering. You do some work with the product side.
So that's why actually I launched my product during the holiday,
Mm-hmm.
and I developed it with a clinic on the West Coast, because
Okay.
what happened was I had so many people telling me, well, I love what you're talking about. I really want to try it, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where to find it. And I'm not sure that what I can find is of high quality. So that's why I work with a clinic that is actually using the same formulation for their patient
Mm-hmm.
in the clinic. So I know it's high grade. I know that, like it's the not just the top ingredients, but also the top formulation.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who kind of develop the formulation. I tried many. That's the one that I think is the best for the brain. There is
Mm-hmm.
some lion's mane, so it's
Mm-hmm.
really helpful for also your memory, and there is also some calming elements in
Mm-hmm.
high energy, but still calming. And so that's something I would recommend people is like make sure you have high quality products,
Mm-hmm.
and they can find on my website. They can order with ship in the US and Canada, so they can find it on the website, order on
Mm-hmm.
the website. But also, I on my website they can also find the different protocols.
Mm-hmm.
Every other day, once every 3 days, or
Mm-hmm.
the right amount and all that
Mm-hmm.
great stuff. That will be optimal for them. One thing I also want to mention is that if you want the most of your microdosing, combine it with your healing practice.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe your healing practice is, for some people, coaching, psychotherapy, tapping, visualization, whatever it is. It's going to augment it.
Mm-hmm.
But just the microdosing is not going to really bring you
You
to
have to be doing some work.
exactly. It's not magic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. It's very great, but it's not magic.
Mm-hmm. That's I love that your protocol so heavily implements the deeper integration. So it's like starting to create those habits. What's the Atomic Habits guy? James Clear, genius marketer, but it reminds me similarly of like the practices that you're laying out in the microdose diet with the protocol, with the quality supplements that you can have greater outcomes in those 90 days. But not only that, that like now the next 90 days, and I love that I mentioned the solstices and the equinoxes, like it's just a natural rhythm. So we
Exactly.
get to be in that harmony.
Exactly. And I think it's very valuable for most of us because we all have the same foundational problems. Low self-worth, feeling unsafe, and we have it to certain degrees. We have it, some people will feel it more in their personal lives, some people will feel it more in their professional lives, but to some extent, I have yet to meet anyone who feel good enough or feel safe in any circumstances. Maybe Eckhart Tolle, but a good Dalai Lama, but there are not many people. So it's also a way to work on the big rocks, the big boulders. And
Mm-hmm.
so the book I wrote is going to be out in May. You can
Mm-hmm.
pre-order it already on
Yes.
Amazon, yeah. And I'm developing the online course because I
Mm-hmm.
do some like videos more than the book. And the goal is also for people to be able to customize a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for you, maybe there are some areas that are more problematic where you just do the week twice.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big deal. So it's really something that for me is important for people to develop their personal power, their critical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
to grow. Don't give your power away to a doctor, a coach, a therapist, and financially, it's very accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at buying microdosing, a bottle of 25 pill can last 2 months and it's $100.
Mm-hmm.
You buy a book, it's $20.
Mm-hmm.
Here you go.
Yeah, no, I mean, the other alternatives, even in psychedelics, can be quite costly, let alone non-psychedelic.
Exactly. So, as much as I love people saying, well, psychedelic assisted therapy, wow, you need to have a lot of financial means in order to be able to access that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important for people to have the opportunity for self-administration,
Mm-hmm.
and not just financially, but also to use your own power versus asking people constantly. I think it's great to work with teachers and people give you, they're listening to you, maybe they're reading my book, but at the end of the day, it's their own opinion that matters.
Mm-hmm.
They know their body better than anyone. They know their story better than anyone. So they have the power to really make the right decision versus asking someone to tell them what they should do.
That's such an important distinction. I feel like what you just shared, it feels like when you get to that point of asking yourself, like, does this work or not, that becomes the beginning of a whole new journey. And that journey then takes its own path. But it's up until that point where you may be just listening to all the experts or outsourcing that. When you get to that point when you're like, no, like, this doesn't work for me, I don't even know why, or you're facing all your stuff and it's an absolute mess and you don't know why you're ever going to get out of it, but like, that you're looking at it for real. And there's so much, I guess the technical term may be enabling, but it's like preventing a person from fully being with themselves. And then part two to that is feeling the empowered to make those decisions for themselves. And when you notice that pattern, I like to distill things to patterns. Like, you can see it so clearly.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like, oh, there's that pattern again. And when you can't unsee that pattern, and
yeah.
it feels like craziness because no one could say anything to you because it's you. There was this experience. I did a 6-month immersion in Kundalini yoga.
I used to do ton of Kundalini
Okay.
yoga, actually.
We're
Yeah.
getting that. Yeah. So for
Yeah.
6 months, I did the 2 hours for 6 months. This was
Oh,
in
wow.
2021 at 4 a.m. Like, I was in
Oh,
it. And so I'm in a very deep season of integration after that. But during that time, I learned about the insourcing versus the outsourcing. And it was so simple. And
exactly.
I had never heard any other wellness teacher teach about that ever. And
Yeah.
it's helped me have a really critical lens at really everything from community to wellness, of where are we helping create those new neural pathways versus just perpetuate the same old paradigm, but with new tools and modalities. So I think in everything you're sharing with the microdose diet, what you won't find is a way to hide from yourself.
Exactly. And, I really like the way you refer about patterns in life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something at the beginning of a book. I spend actually the first 3 weeks. You don't microdose, you don't tap. You spend 3 weeks looking at the patterns
Mm-hmm.
because you need to make space, but you also, so there is a lot of clearing, but you also need to understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And even if a lot of our experiences are similar, there are, what you might have experienced, even if I had experienced exactly the same, my nervous system is different. My mind is different. So I would have reacted different to your trauma, even if they were exactly the same. I might have been traumatized by something different than you,
Mm-hmm.
even if we had the same experience. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important for people to understand that when I realized that I grew up in an extremely authoritative environment,
Mm-hmm.
and giving my power away was my default mode to anyone, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was afraid to ask the cab driver to drop me at point B if I had asked point A when I get in, because I was just like, well, I didn't say that, I cannot change what I mean, you're a 35-year-old woman working in finance, managing whatever, but you're afraid to ask the cab driver to drop you at a more convenient place. You're like, come on. But because everyone for me was an authoritative figure.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started realizing that, I was like, oh my God, that's also why I'm always so anxious, because I was always trying to protect myself, because it's like, oh my God, they're going to tell me this, they're going to tell me that, you're overthinking, da, 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 da. So it's very important. I mean, that's one thing that you mentioned. And for the people who are listening, look at your life. What are the patterns? Because that, you know, you're the best detective of yourself, you know, be your own Sherlock Holmes. Look at your patterns. And when you look at that, you're going to be able to see, well, there is a challenge, you know, like I am not where I want to be, and I keep facing the same problems. Bingo. It's like great news. You found a nugget, you know. Now
Mm-hmm.
it's a problem to solve versus
Mm-hmm.
being in the dark, you know.
Oh, so good. And this is why I love business so much. You know, we're talking about problems. Every given day feels like the amplification of every problem. You know, and I feel so connected to the role of business in our world for prosperity and well-being and consciousness, because it's problem solving. And you
Exactly.
know, that's without getting into all the other things that could also be happening when we talk about business, which are important to discuss too. But I just think at its heart, you know, we are amazing problem solvers. And even through your protocol, it's like you're being the detective in your own life for your own problems. What happens when you're empowered to solve those in your own life? What other problems do you have clarity of mind to solve differently than you ever could have before?
Yeah, and you know what I love as well with this idea of consciousness, you know, prosperity, well-being, is that, think about it. If just 5% of people, let's just use banking as an
Mm-hmm.
example, if only 5% of the people increase their level of consciousness
Mm-hmm.
and don't feel as threatened by everything anymore, feel more authentic, feel more creative, are not on autopilot. Can you imagine the change it would have in the world? And that's why when I put together the microdose diet, my audience is mainly my former peers. So
Mm-hmm.
finance, tech CEOs, you know, that type of things. Because if they are able to increase their level of understanding, their business gonna do better, but they're also doing business differently.
Mm-hmm.
And they're impacting everyone around, their employees, their clients, their suppliers. So to your point, it's so important to have entrepreneur, executive more conscious.
Mm-hmm.
They have a tremendous role to play. And then obviously their families, their friends, and all of that are impacted as well.
The ripple effect of that. It's like detoxing off the chaos, the process. It really, you know, I keep coming back to that word chaos, but you're completely rewriting your story. And how you were talking earlier, it's like it didn't just happen in one day to get to the point that you're at. It happened over 30, 40, however many years.
Yeah.
And that being gentle with it, unwinding. I personally notice sometimes it's almost like a novel feeling of bored. I couldn't let myself ever feel bored. And then it's like, oh, I feel bored. And I don't really feel bored, but in those moments of calm, there's such novelty. And I'm
Yeah.
like, it's like, yeah, you may be resting or you're not just on every single second. And that's going to be changing how things feel. And, you know, you hear that a lot in the financial world, future of work. And I think about what could the workplace look like? I saw a headline today. It said, you know, if you work the night shift, your lifespan decreases by 15%.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, like there's people that have to work at night. you
Exactly.
know, and so we're making these trade-offs, but does that person that knows like I'm cutting my life 15% shorter, should they have a choice in that? There's
Exactly.
consciousness involved in that whole line of thinking, but I was like, what if we had created a world where we value, say, life and well-being? Maybe we don't need things 24/7. Like that guy gets to have those extra 15% of time. It's reimagining
Exactly.
everything. But
And it's
it's curious. It's a curious journey.
exactly, but it's very funny because yesterday my husband and I had the conversation on exactly that. People who work night shift and who have actually shorter life expectancy. So there must be something in the ether right here. But it's really rethinking if you look at healthcare or the
Mm-hmm.
justice system, we're very much back-ended instead of being on prevention and promotion.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about curing illness, putting people in jail, or maybe rehab. But you know what? Why don't we allocate that money to prevention and promotion so we don't waste the potential of these individuals, we don't waste their lives, they are productive for society instead of having a cancer at 45 because they ate shit. Well, maybe you educate them and you give them quality products earlier. Same thing for drug program, all of that. So I think and that's very much the capitalism mindset, which is the treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're at a point where, maybe for the next 5, 10, 15 years, we just have to run two systems. One system that is going to be more people don't like to pay taxes, which I understand. No one like to pay taxes, but you need to keep the current system operating, but you need to start spending more on promotion, on
Mm-hmm.
prevention. Because what's the point of having all these individuals who cannot participate in the society, or even to have you, me, everyone else operating at 50% of their potential because they're stuck in their, self-sabotaging behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Any sense? So I keep hearing, oh, productivity, productivity, da, da, da. But the best productivity is to make sure the individuals we already have are optimal. And I mean, we are far from operating at an optimal level here. So, to your point, when you look at it from a more curious perspective,
Mm-hmm.
only seeing how much you can improve things. Yes, you see what's not working well, and the goal, it's always easy to criticize, but what can be done to
Mm-hmm.
make things better? Alternative therapy? Can you bring more of the tapping in hospitals instead of feeding people painkiller, opioid, and creating, it's just all these things that, are maybe outside the box, but it's not very complicated. We all know about the placebo effect. So we all know that the mind is extremely powerful. So why are we not harnessing that?
It's getting to the point, at least for me, I look around and I sometimes am in such disbelief, like it doesn't even make sense anymore. I'll give you, this is an example that I think is a funny example I haven't talked much about, but I had a really weird experience at a gas station a few years ago. I was with my sister-in-law and I was getting gas. We had my dog with us, and a car, this was in the middle of the day, pulled up around the gas station and faced me as the driver, and all of a sudden started to rev the engine, and like I started to feel extremely unsafe and that something
Yeah,
was about to happen. So I was able to kick the car into gear real quick, and I actually pulled out from the gas station pump and actually took off the the nozzle from
yeah,
the because I drove away, and
yeah,
it was this whole thing. But I just look at it and I thought gas stations are a perfect example of like a place a lot of people have to go to. We know electric is happening, but it's going to take a while. What if gas stations could be like a little lifestyle hub that you could pick something up nourishing, let's say? But I just like, I had such a weird experience. And I'm just like, this should not be where like crime and getting underage alcohol or whatever the things we
yeah.
know for gas stations. Why isn't there anything better? And the way I've started thinking about things, I could give you an example of that for every single thing. But I think that that kind of thinking gives us the invitation to think about possibility. And when you do that and engage in that level of thinking and then come back, like the gas station all of a sudden does seem just really weird. There's like no excuse for it to be like that anymore.
Exactly, exactly. And if you want to tie it up to your audience of, entrepreneur, it's
Yeah.
exactly that. It's like, wow, you're taking a problem like this one.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, wow, is there a business model
Mm-hmm.
where people feel safe and something that can be developed around that?
Mm-hmm.
So why conscious entrepreneurship is so important. It's for profit. I'm not saying that you're doing it as a non-profit,
Yeah.
but it's looking at, and that's also why I love psychedelics so much, because it helps you change the paradigm and now
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at things differently. And this idea of saying, oh, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, suddenly you don't think that way. You don't take suboptimal situation like the one you mentioned, which is one of the hundreds of
Thousands, yeah,
examples.
trillions, probably, right?
Exactly. And you're looking at it and you're like, well, maybe there is something that can happen here. And, when I decided to go in psychedelics, I was like, I believe in that, but also it's a great business opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great investment opportunity. So it was not just this idea of, okay, I'm going to become a yoga teacher in Goa, which is very good. I'm not
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
but that's the thing sometimes, and I want to say that to our audience, is that
Mm-hmm.
not because you're starting to become more authentic and you have less fear that suddenly you're going to become a couch potato or that you're going to be happy with living on minimum standard. That's absolutely that. I would say it's almost the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you're going to have bigger dreams, but
Mm-hmm.
you're also going to have more clarity on how to achieve them. And it's
Mm-hmm.
be easier to do so. And that's the conversation I often have with people in the business community that are looking into the microdose diet is because they're like, well, does that mean that, tomorrow I'm leaving my wife and I'm going to start, I don't know, repairing truck in a small city in the coast? I'm like, well, if it's what you desire to do, so be it. But it's not the psychedelic that's going to make you make these crazy choices, Like, on the contrary, you can be an executive in the same organization or an entrepreneur in the same company. You're just going to look at things differently. And your day is going to feel longer. You're going to have more focus. Your mood's going to be more elevated. You're going to be more creative. Doesn't mean you have to throw away anything you've done. You're just doing it better, faster, and more purposefully.
Mm-hmm. It's like you're being more you. It unlocks more you.
Exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you really think about it, the you is still deep down. It's just that you got 250, 100,000 layers of your mother crap, your father crap, your brother crap, your teacher crap. And every year you have like a new quote of someone, and it's just removing these codes that are not you and are not serving you. It's just making you play small.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're fearful, you're playing small. If you're stressed, you're playing small. And that's the thing that I believe is the most important for people to understand is that the goal is to really, really, really living your life fully.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and you cannot do that if you are playing by others' rules and you're leading someone else's life.
Mm-hmm.
You need to get rid of all that crap that doesn't belong to you. So
It's like getting you to your source point and like living the life from there.
exactly. And again, it doesn't need to add, it's removing.
That that's going to be our big mantra for the end of the episode. I know we're coming to close, Peggy, but I do want to ask you if it's a few things for each or one, that's fine. But in your own well-being and your own business pursuits, it's like your non-negotiable. And that could have been the end of the episode. It's less, right? It's like
Yeah,
removing. But
yeah.
I'd love to hear from you as like the final integration.
Yeah, so the most important thing for me is actually, you mentioned it, it's less. So clearing the old.
Mm,
So your mind, your body, your spirit. And I understand that, okay, not everyone is keen on cutting alcohol, sugar, and all of that, but eat cleaner, drink cleaner, have a cleaner environment, have
mm,
a cleaner mind. Because if you want something, it took me years to understand. If you want new opportunities to come,
mhm,
you need to create space. And if you're already up to your eyebrows with stuff and stuff you don't even want, need, are interested in, it's not going to happen. So be congruent. What do you want? If you want that, so why are you still doing all that crap? Why are you
mm.
doing that crap? And that is the best way to detect a pattern. And that's a gift.
That is the gift. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Peggy. I'll have the links in the show notes. We have Peggy Van de Plassche, her website, LinkedIn, and her Substack, the microdose diet, the book coming out in May. Get the pre-order in, realign your path to success, and we'll definitely stay tuned for your online aspect of that and the supplements, which the supplements I was already checking out. I'm so excited. So uh, thank you again, Peggy, for being on the show. And if you have one final thought or quote you want to leave our listeners with.
Well, thank you so much. Like the only thing I want to tell people is question everything. Question everything.
We'll give that dramatic pause. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the Lila Life Show. And we'll see you next week. And again, Peggy, thanks again.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Have a good day.